good. Very good.
Hamanat Haku, Netawan Alan Salazar, Netawan Puchuk Yayak, Netawan Thunder and Lightning. Pasekfa Nukasin, Chogayanga Nukasin, Tapu Nukasin. I'm Alan Salazar. I was born in Pasekfa, which is San Fernando, California. My tribal ancestors trace to the Tataviam village of Chogayanga in Santa Clarita and the Chumash village of Tapu in Simi Valley. I get my indigenous ancestry from my father's side of the family. My pop was a Marine and fought in World War II, and he taught us all to be proud of our Indian heritage. My ancestors, my great-great-grandparents, my great-great-great-grandparents, my great-great-great-great-grandparents helped build the San Fernando Mission and were part of the slave labor workforce for over 40 years. Some of them died there, and some of them were born there. My mom is English and Portuguese, but I always identified as Indian, which was the term that was used in the 50s and 60s when I was growing up. My tribal ancestors that were taken to the San Fernando Mission had an extremely difficult life. When I said those third and fourth grade grandparents, they survived some of the most horrendous time for California Indians, for tribal people in all of America. My ancestors, besides being enslaved at the mission, my great-grandparents and my great-great-grandparents survived the bounty system. Let me explain what the bounty system is. From 1849 to 1873, it was the official state policy. Our first governor proclaimed he was going to exterminate all California Indians. And he started a bounty system. He got Washington, D.C. to give the state of California over $200,000 to pay California citizens to kill California Indians. So my ancestors were forced to assimilate. They didn't have a choice. In order to survive the mission period, the bounty system, they put their head down and they worked really hard. When you're brown-skinned, at that time, you didn't want to draw any attention to yourself. You tried to blend into the American culture. We were the farm laborers. We were the ranch hands. We were the cooks, the maids. My father, my grandparents, it was very difficult for them to survive the Great Depression. I remember stories of my father saying that when he was 7 and 8 years old, he was already working, trying to bring in money for the family's shining shoes in downtown San Fernando. Both of my parents and my grandparents on both sides of the family, they're working class people. I come from very humble background. And what I learned about my culture, I learned probably the way most of you learned. Watching TV shows, those old Western movies. That's why me and my brother wanted Mohawk haircuts. That's the last time I was cute, by the way. But it's overwhelming when you know very little about your culture. It's something that I was proud about. So I didn't have the opportunities that some Native peoples do in America. I'm a tribal member of the Fernandinho Tataviam Band of Mission Indians. We are a federally non-recognized tribe, which means we don't have a reservation. We don't get any assistance from the Bureau of Indian Affairs or the U.S. government. We never signed a treaty with the U.S. government. We never sold our land. We believe our land was stolen and taken from us. What happened to my family, my indigenous family, happened to thousands of families in California. There are more California indigenous people that are actually from non-federally recognized tribes than there are from federally recognized tribes. So trying to piece together my history, my tribal history, was very difficult. It was almost overwhelming at times. I didn't have the opportunity like young people that lived on reservations to go to tribal elders and tribal leaders and learn about vision quest or spirit animals or animal teachers. So when young indigenous people in the 60s and 70s, when I was transitioning from being a young boy to a young man, I didn't have the opportunities that the young indigenous people did on reservations. While they were having vision quests, dreaming of the white buffalo, I was dreaming of Vanna White and Betty White. But the young Betty White, she was hot. But like I said, it was overwhelming when I was a young man. What do I do to save my culture? What do I do to revitalize my culture? What should I focus on? Languages and native cultures are extremely important. We've been trying to revitalize our languages for 30 years. I'm not a linguist, I realized right away. It's difficult for me to learn a new language. I tried basket weaving. That's very difficult. I wanted to learn about all of our plants and how we use them for food and for medicine, for healing. It's overwhelming. But I realized I come from a construction background. My pop, my grandfather Manuel, my brothers, my uncles, me, we were in construction. We worked with these. And I realized I can build big things. I can build canoes. The Chumash word is tamol. I can build big things. Can't weave to save my life. And in 1997, I was asked if I would like to be involved with revitalizing the Chumash canoe culture to help build a traditional plank tamol. And I was excited about that opportunity. It was a small group of Chumash people and supporters of the Chumash people. And we realized we had an opportunity to revitalize the Chumash maritime culture, our Chumash canoe culture. And we started building tamols in 1997. We built Eluiyun, which is the Chumash word for swordfish. And we started building our plank canoes, gluing them together the way our ancestors glued them together, tying them together the way our ancestors used to tie them together. And we used redwood as my ancestors used, if they could get it, when redwood trees would wash down the coast. They would get those logs, and they made their own planks. We had the luxury of going to a lumber yard and buying our 2x6s and 2x8s, but my ancestors, they made their own planks, and they made 20-foot, 30-foot, 40-foot, even 50-foot long canoes. And we didn't build our canoes to go out and catch a little bit of fish. We built our canoes to go out and catch 300-400 pounds of fish. They're flat bottom. They carry a lot of weight. We can take 10, 12, 20 people in our tamol and go out to the islands off our coast, to Anacapa, Santa Cruz, Santa Rosa, San Miguel, and then come back with more people. They carry great amounts of weight. They're tremendous canoes. I believe in my own opinion, they're beautiful canoes. There's only 2 tribes on the whole West Coast, from Alaska to Baja, that built plank canoes, plank tamols. And that was my Chumash ancestors and the Tongva Gabrielina, whose land we are on tonight. Those are the only 2 tribes on the whole West Coast that built plank canoes. So bringing back that part of the culture was very important to us. And what we realized when we started building them and started practicing and paddling in them, the Chumash community came back. The canoe was the focal point of the Chumash community once again. Canoes have been the focal point of tribal villages and tribal communities for thousands of years, and we've built these tamols for thousands of years. If you owned a tamol, you were a wealthy, influential person. And in 2001, we made our first crossing, historic, from the mainland out to Limu, the island that we now call Santa Cruz Island. In over 160 years, the Chumash had not built their tamols, they had not paddled in them. And to paddle from the mainland out to one of our ancestral villages, it was so important to us as tribal people. In that first crossing, my son was one of the paddlers, and I was one of the paddlers. We've made 14 more crossings from the mainland out to the islands in our traditional canoes. And last summer, my son once again was one of the paddlers in the crossing. My grandson was one of the paddlers in the crossing. I was one of the paddlers in the crossing. When we started doing all those crossings and all those practices and building our canoes, all those things that I'm not good at came back to us. When we would have practices, our native speakers would come to our practice and share their wisdom about the language. Our basket weavers, our plant experts would come to our practices and our crossings and share their wisdom. Our craftspeople that made seaweed rattles and clapper sticks came to our practices and shared their wisdom and knowledge. Once again, like I said, the canoes were the focal point of our community. And my message tonight to all of you is, in the beginning I mentioned that my mom is English and Portuguese. And like many of us, during the pandemic, I started researching, wanting to learn a few things here and there, and I researched my English and Portuguese ancestry. That's why I love Earl Grey tea. I already knew that. But what I learned was really amazing, that when I started looking at old drawings and paintings, the English tribal people, the Portuguese tribal people 4,000 years ago lived in villages and lived lifestyles were hunters and gatherers, almost exactly the same way as my Chumash and Tataviam ancestors did. So my message tonight is we're all tribal people. Wherever you're from, at one time, your people were tribal. And I mentioned the bounty system and the difficulties at the mission and how hard that was for my tribal ancestors. To me, one of the amazing things about that period in our history was that my people were labeled as savages, and that the Spanish and the Americans were civilized. And we were labeled savages partly because we worshiped the sun and the moon and the stars, the way your ancestors did thousands of years ago. And we would do ceremony to honor the bears, the eagle, the wolves. And we were labeled savages for that. And I think if I'm a savage for doing a ceremony to respect the bears, if I do a ceremony in honor to respect the wolves, then I'm a savage. Because the Spanish and the Americans, they killed all the bears. They killed all the wolves. So when I say we're all tribal people, I encourage all of you, get back in touch with your tribal roots. Tribal knowledge will get us out of this mess that we're in right now. There's going to be some speakers after me that are going to drive this message home even more than I am. So I believe with all my heart that I'm proud that we brought in our young people, that my grandson is paddling, and that it's going to continue on. The Chumash, we're one of the oldest tribes in North America. We can prove that we've been here for more than 13,000 years. And we will be building these canoes for another 13,000 years. The only way we're going to do it is if we take care of our waters. Like I said, my Portuguese and English ancestors, they were water people. They were ocean people. They built canoes. Then they started building bigger ships and traveling all around the world. We're all water people. The rivers, the lakes, the oceans, they will cleanse us. They will reunite us and bring us together as water people once again. So I will close with the few words that I do know in my Chumash language. Ki ushka all, we will all be strong. Ki sa kantush, we will all believe. Ki sa shwala, we will all love. Ki Antikush, Ki Antikush, Ki Antikush. We are all alive. We are all alive. We are all alive. My people are still alive. Thank you. Have a blessed evening.